Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a world where beauty standards weren't just demanding, they were downright dangerous. Imagine yourself in an ancient workshop, the air thick with the scent of crushed herbs, strange minerals, and maybe a hint of something metallic. You see powders too fine, paste too vibrant, and tools that look more like instruments of polite torture than anything you'd find in a modern makeup bag. This isn't your local Sephora, that's for sure. It's a place where the pursuit of an idealized self could, quite literally, cost you your health, your comfort, and sometimes, if you were particularly unlucky with that newfangled skin whitener, your life. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your modern sensibilities intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the threshold of epochs long past, peering into societies where the definition of beauty was carved out of very different materials than our own. The desire to be attractive, to be admired, it's not a new invention. It's as old as humanity itself. Think back to the very earliest humans. What did beautiful even mean then? Perhaps it was something as primal as a strong build, clear eyes and healthy teeth. All outward signals of good genes and the ability to survive, to provide, to procreate. Mainstream historical fact: archaeologists have unearthed pierced shells and beads, clearly used as adornments, dating back over 100,000 years in places like Africa and the Middle East, proving our ancestors were into accessorizing long before fashion magazines. But the path from simple adornment to complex, often agonizing beauty rituals is a winding one. It wasn't always about enhancing natural vitality. Sometimes, the most coveted aesthetics were those that screamed artifice, that deliberately defied nature. You'll find that the pursuit of these ideals often involved a level of commitment that makes your bi-weekly manicure look like a fleeting thought. We're talking about reshaping bones, scarring skin, ingesting substances that would make a modern pharmacist's hair stand on end. The discomfort, the sheer dedication, it's almost humbling in a slightly terrifying way. Consider the ingenuity involved. Without the benefit of modern science or chemical understanding, ancient peoples were like raw, instinctive artists and alchemists of the human form. They experimented. A crushed beetle for a vibrant red? Why not? A poultice of, well, let's just say organic matter for a smoother complexion. Worth a try, apparently. Quirky tidbit for you. In some ancient cultures, elongating the skull during infancy was considered the height of beauty and status, achieved by binding a baby's head with boards or cloth. Imagine the parental dedication to that particular look, not to mention the permanent results. You couldn't just decide you preferred a rounder head shape next season. And as we delve deeper, you'll notice that beauty was rarely just skin deep. It was deeply interwoven with social status, spiritual beliefs, and communal identity. Historians still argue whether many of these elaborate beautification practices were primarily for aesthetic appeal, or if they served more profound roles as markers of tribal affiliation, rites of passage, signals of wealth and leisure, or even as conduits for spiritual power. That intricate tattoo, that carefully applied paint, was it to attract a partner, to appease a god, or to announce your place in the world? Often, it was a complex blend of all these things. The price of beauty, as you'll come to understand, wasn't always paid in simple pain or discomfort. Sometimes, it was paid with restricted movement, with chronic health problems, or, as we'll see with some rather unfortunate cosmetic ingredients, with a slow, creeping toxicity. It really makes you ponder the driving forces behind such extreme measures. Were their motivations so different from the pressures many feel today, amplified by social media and ever-shifting trends? Perhaps not in essence, though their tools and understanding of consequences were vastly different. It's like someone discovering fire and immediately wondering if they can use it to curl their hair. Admirable ambition, questionable safety protocol. That's a bit of a joke, of course, but the spirit of bold, sometimes reckless, experimentation was certainly there. The very idea of what constitutes beauty is such a chameleon, isn't it? It slinks through centuries and across continents, transforming itself with an almost whimsical disregard for consistency. What one culture revered as the pinnacle of human perfection, another might have found utterly bizarre. Trying to explain the appeal of, say, a tiny bound foot to someone who values athletic prowess would be a conversation full of confused silences. It's almost comical how fickle our species can be about its own appearance. You think today's fleeting fashion trends are wild? Just wait. This journey we're embarking on, it's not just a catalogue of peculiar practices, it's an exploration of human nature, our ingenuity, our desires, our anxieties, and our incredible capacity to endure in the name of an ideal. It's a testament to our creativity, yes, but also a stark reminder of our occasional spectacular folly. You thought navigating the modern dating scene was tough. Imagine doing it while also worrying if your face powder was slowly poisoning you, or if your elaborate hairstyle might spontaneously combust near an open flame. Perspective, right? So as we begin to gently lift the veil on these ancient rituals, remember that these were real people, with real lives and real aspirations. Their world was different, their knowledge was different, but their fundamental human urges were likely very similar to our own. Their stories, encoded in these often extreme beauty practices, are threads in the vast, colourful and sometimes baffling tapestry of human history. We're about to step into a world where no pain, no gain wasn't just a gym mantra. It was a daily, lived reality for those aspiring to the era's epitome of allure. And it all starts with a deceptively simple quest, to be beautiful. And so, this quest for beauty, this sometimes perilous path, leads us now, as the lanterns flicker low, to ancient China. You find yourself in a quiet chamber, perhaps a boudoir adorned with silk hangings and intricately carved wooden furniture. The air is still, save for the soft rustle of robes and the faintest scent of jasmine or plum blossom. But another, more dominant presence hangs in the atmosphere. The subtle, almost metallic tang of a particular cosmetic. Here, one of the most coveted badges of beauty, a supreme mark of elegance and high status, was a complexion of almost supernatural whiteness. Not just a healthy glow, mind you. We're talking about a pallor so profound it could border on the ghostly, luminous matte finish that whispered of a life lived entirely indoors, untouched by the sun's common kiss. It was a beauty that spoke of delicacy, of refinement, of being so far removed from manual labour that your skin had never known a day of toil. To achieve this ethereal look, women, and sometimes men of certain standing, turned to a rather potent substance, lead. Yes, you heard that right. Finely powdered white lead, often known by its alluring historical name, ceruse, was the foundation of choice. Imagine it. A small, ornate porcelain pot filled with a snowy, deceptively soft powder. You might dip a brush or a puff into it, the tiny particles rising in a faint cloud catching the dim light. The application itself was an art. It wasn't a light dusting, it was often layered on, creating a smooth, opaque mask that evened out any imperfections and bestowed that sought-after alabaster sheen. It's the complete opposite of today's obsession with the sun-kissed tan. Back then, a tan was the mark of a peasant, someone who worked the fields. To be pale was to be privileged. The mainstream historical fact here is that the use of lead-based cosmetics wasn't unique to China. Ceruse was popular in various ancient cultures, including Egypt, Greece, and Rome, and its use persisted well into the Renaissance and beyond in Europe. Cleopatra herself is thought to have used lead in her kohl eyeliner, though we'll get to Egyptian practices a bit later. But in China, the dedication to this particular form of pallor was especially pronounced and had a very long history, stretching back centuries at least to the Shang dynasty. Think of it as the ultimate Instagram filter of its day, only this filter came with a rather hefty hidden surcharge on your health. It was the original killer complexion, and that's not entirely a joke. Now this lead powder wasn't just dug out of the ground and slapped on. Its preparation could be quite involved, often involving the corrosion of lead plates with vinegar fumes, then scraping off the white powdery substance that formed. Sometimes it was mixed with other ingredients, rice powder for texture perhaps, or even crushed pearls for an added luminosity if you were particularly wealthy. Quirky tidbit, some ancient Chinese beauty recipes also incorporated Nightingale droppings, not for whitening directly, but for their supposed skin cleansing and bleaching properties, before the lead powder application. We'll definitely be revisiting those fascinating droppings later. For now, just picture the dedication. Bird poop facials followed by a layer of heavy metal, the things one does for beauty. The immediate effects of the lead powder were, visually, quite dramatic. It truly did create a startlingly white, flawless canvas. Imperfections vanished. The face became an almost doll-like mask onto which other features like dramatically shaped eyebrows or rouged lips could be painted with precision. But the allure was a dangerous siren song. Lead, as we now know all too well, is a potent neurotoxin. With each application, small amounts would be absorbed through the skin. More alarmingly, particles could be inhaled or accidentally ingested. A stray fleck on the lips, a cloud of powder during application. The damage was slow, insidious. At first, it might have been skin problems, dryness, blemishes, a strange greying or blackening of the skin underneath where the lead reacted with the body's chemistry, or even sulfur in the air, ironically forcing users to apply even thicker layers of white powder to cover up the damage caused by the powder itself. A vicious cycle, if ever there was one. Then, the internal symptoms would begin to creep in. Abdominal pain, headaches, fatigue, anemia. Over time, with prolonged exposure, more severe consequences would manifest. Neurological damage, paralysis, infertility, kidney failure, and eventually madness and death. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That the very substance used to project an image of delicate, ethereal beauty was in reality a creeping poison. Historians still argue whether the users, particularly in the earlier periods, were fully aware of the severe long-term dangers of lead, or if the immediate aesthetic benefits and the immense societal pressure simply outweighed any suspected risks. Were the early signs of poisoning dismissed as unrelated ailments? Or was there a sort of willful ignorance, a trade-off consciously made? It's hard to say for certain. Knowledge of poison existed, of course, but the subtle, cumulative effects of something applied externally might have been harder to pinpoint directly. Imagine trying to explain to your great-great-great-grandmother that her favourite face cream was essentially a slow-acting assassin. She'd probably just think you were jealous of her flawless, if slightly toxic, glow. The desire for this pallid perfection was deeply ingrained. It appears in ancient Chinese poetry and art, this ideal of the jade-like complexion. It was a powerful symbol, and symbols often demand sacrifice. You can almost hear the soft whispers in those ancient courts, the clinking of cosmetic tools, the shared secrets of how to achieve the whitest white, all while the silent threat of the lead lurked just beneath the surface of that porcelain pot. It makes you wonder about the countless unnamed women who suffered for this ideal, their ailments perhaps attributed to female frailty or malevolent spirits, when the culprit was right there on their dressing table. Remember that polite torture we joked about in the introduction? This wasn't an instrument. It was an ingredient, far more subtle in its cruelty. It's a stark reminder that what is considered beautiful can come at an extraordinary cost, a theme we'll see repeated across cultures and time periods. The ancient Chinese pursuit of a ghostly white complexion, using powders laden with lead, stands as one of the most poignant examples of this dangerous dance between aspiration and adversity. You're not just applying makeup, you're making a statement, a potentially fatal one. Leaving the ghostly allure of lead-laced complexions behind, we now turn our gaze downwards, to the very feet of Chinese women, and to a practice that is perhaps one of the most infamous and controversial beauty rituals in history, footbinding, or shanzu. You're no longer in a dimly lit boudoir focused on powders and potions, but perhaps in a quiet inner room, a place where something deeply transformative and undeniably painful is taking place. This isn't about enhancing a feature, it's about radically reshaping it, moulding young, pliable bones into an entirely new, and to our modern eyes, startling form. The ideal was not just a small foot, but a lotus foot, a tiny, arched, pointed creation, often no more than 3 to 4 inches long, said to resemble the unopened bud of a lotus flower. The process typically began when a girl was very young, usually between the ages of 4 and 7, though sometimes as early as 3 or as late as 9 or 10. Her mother or another older female relative would undertake the task. Imagine those tiny feet soaked in warm water or a mixture of herbs and sometimes animal blood to soften them. Then, the 4 smaller toes on each foot would be curled under, pressed tightly against the sole. The arch was then forcibly broken or strained upwards. Long strips of binding cloth, often silk or cotton, would be wrapped tightly around the foot, pulling the toes and heel closer together, forcing the foot to fold and arch. These bandages were drawn tighter and tighter over time. The bindings changed regularly to clean the feet and prevent infection. Though infection, as you can imagine, was a constant and agonizing threat. This was not a one-time procedure. It was a relentless, years-long ordeal. The pain was, by all accounts, excruciating, especially in the initial stages. Girls would weep, beg for the bindings to be loosened, but the cultural pressure was immense. A mainstream historical fact. Footbinding was practiced in China for roughly 1,000 years, from approximately the 10th century Song dynasty, until it was officially banned in the early 20th century, though the practice lingered in some rural areas for decades after. Its longevity speaks volumes about its deep cultural embeddedness. It wasn't just a fleeting fashion. It became a core component of female identity and marriageability for a vast portion of the population, though it was more common among Han Chinese women than among other ethnic groups like the Manchus, who actually tried to ban it at various points without much success. Why? Why endure such a thing? The reasons are complex and layered. Initially, it's thought to have begun among court dancers in the 10th or 11th century, with the bound feet allowing for a particular kind of swaying, delicate gait that was considered alluring. From there, it spread through the upper classes as a mark of status and refinement. A woman with bound feet could not perform manual labour. Her tiny, crippled feet were a clear signal of her family's wealth and her own life of leisure. She was an ornament, a prize. Over centuries, it became an almost indispensable prerequisite for marriage. Mothers bound their daughters' feet to ensure they could find a good husband. Men, it was said, found the lotus feet intensely erotic. Not just the feet themselves, but the mincing, swaying walk, the lotus gait that resulted. There's a rather unsettling irony here, crippling a woman to make her more attractive. The quirky tidbit here is that there was an entire elaborate lore and eroticism surrounding bound feet. Tiny, exquisitely embroidered silk shoes called lotus shoes were made to encase these miniature feet. There were even shoe games, and a whole vocabulary to describe the different shapes and qualities of bound feet. Men would supposedly never see the bare bound foot, only its beautifully shod presentation, adding to the mystique. Some literary sources describe the intoxicating scent of the powders and perfumes used to mask the often unpleasant odours that could result from the tightly bound, unventilated feet. It's a strange juxtaposition of perceived beauty and underlying physical reality. The long-term consequences beyond the obvious pain and disability were severe. Women with bound feet had difficulty walking, often needing support to move even short distances. They were prone to falls, chronic pain, infections, and poor circulation. The curled undertoes could become ingrown, nails piercing the sole. Sometimes flesh would rot away, or toes might even fall off. Yet the practice persisted. Historians still argue whether footbinding was primarily a tool of patriarchal control, designed to keep women subservient and immobile, or if women themselves became active participants and enforcers of the tradition, seeing it as a necessary path to social acceptance and a good marriage. The truth likely lies in a complex interplay of both. Daughters learned it from their mothers, and it became a deeply ingrained cultural norm, a must-have for social survival in many circles. You can almost feel the suffocating tightness of those bindings, the relentless ache in the bones, the way it would reshape not just a foot, but a life, dictating where a woman could go, what she could do, how she would be perceived. It makes the discomfort of modern high heels seem trivial in comparison. The dedication, the endurance it required from such a young age, is staggering. It's a powerful example of how far a society will go to enforce its particular aesthetic ideals, and how deeply those ideals can become intertwined with notions of femininity, class, and desirability. This wasn't about a splash of lead powder, easily washed away, though not without consequence, as we know. This was about permanently altering the human body, a commitment written in bone and sinew. Imagine the girls, their childhoods marked by this constant throbbing pain, learning to navigate their world on these reconfigured feet. The practice created a very specific female aesthetic, one of helplessness and delicacy, which was highly prized. But beneath the embroidered silk and the alluring sway, there was a story of immense suffering, a testament to the extreme lengths humans will go to conform to and perpetuate cultural definitions of beauty. It's a sombre note in our journey, a reminder that beauty can indeed be a harsh mistress. As we gently lift our gaze from the painful constraints of lotus feet, let's allow our attention to travel upwards, to the elaborate crowns of glory that adorned the heads of ancient Chinese women, and indeed men of certain distinction. You're now in a bustling dressing room, or perhaps a more serene private chamber, where the air is filled with the scent of fragrant oils and the subtle click of pins and combs. Before you, a stylist, or perhaps a team of dedicated attendants is at work, not just teasing and arranging natural hair, but constructing architectural marvels that defy gravity and speak volumes about status, occasion, and artistic sensibility. Chinese hairstyles were not merely a matter of practicality, they were intricate expressions of identity, often taking hours to create and maintain. The sheer variety and complexity are astounding. From the Han dynasty through the Tang, Song, Ming and Qing dynasties, hairstyles evolved with the times, but a consistent theme was the love of height, volume and elaborate ornamentation. Think of towering buns, intricate braids woven into complex patterns, and carefully arranged loops and coils that seemed to sculpt the very air around the wearer's head. These weren't your simple ponytails or messy buns, these were statements, mainstream historical fact. During the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, often considered a golden age for Chinese arts and culture, women's hairstyles reached extravagant heights and complexity, with some coiffures incorporating multiple buns, loops and even wings, often held in place with a sophisticated system of pins and frames. It was a period of particular opulence and creativity in hair artistry. To achieve these gravity-defying looks, natural hair alone was often insufficient. This is where the ingenuity really shines. Wigs, or jiafa, and hairpieces made from human hair, or sometimes animal hair like yak or horsehair, were extensively used. These weren't just subtle extensions for a bit of extra volume. We're talking about entire pre-constructed sections, sometimes built on wireframes or bamboo structures, that could be attached to the natural hair to create truly monumental effects. Imagine the weight of some of these creations. It makes you wonder how they avoided chronic neck pain. Perhaps a strong neck was another unstated beauty ideal. That's a small jest, of course, but the dedication to the aesthetic was certainly no laughing matter for those involved in the daily upkeep. The quirky tidbit here is the astonishing range of materials used not just for the structure, but for the adornment of these hairstyles. Beyond the expected gold, silver, jade and pearl pins, combs and tiaras, you'd find ornaments made from carved wood, lacquered bamboo, kingfisher feathers, prized for their iridescent blue, tortoise shell, and even cicada wings arranged to look like delicate hair accessories. Some hairstyles incorporated fresh flowers, while others featured elaborate representations of phoenixes, dragons, or blossoms, all crafted from precious materials. It was like wearing a miniature, highly symbolic sculpture on your head. You could probably tell a woman's entire social standing, marital status, and even the specific occasion she was dressed for just by looking at her hair. The creation of these hairstyles was a painstaking process. For the elite, it would involve personal hairdressers and maids spending hours each morning. The hair would be smoothed with fragrant oils. Camellia oil was a popular choice, then meticulously sectioned, braided, coiled, and pinned. The addition of wigs and hairpieces required skillful blending to make them appear seamless with the natural hair. Historians still argue whether the extreme elaborateness of some courtly hairstyles served primarily as a display of wealth and leisure, proving one had the time and resources for such creations, or if they also carried deeper symbolic meanings related to cosmic order, auspiciousness, or specific mythological figures. Perhaps, as with many things, it was a bit of both, an aesthetic choice deeply imbued with cultural resonance. Think about the tools. Long, slender pins of various materials, some with ornate heads, used to secure sections of hair and attach ornaments. Combs of wood, ivory or jade, not just for detangling but for styling and as decorative elements themselves. There were also specific pomades and setting lotions, often made from natural resins or sticky plant extracts, to help hold the elaborate structures in place. It was a true art form passed down through generations. You can almost hear the quiet concentration in the room, the precise movements of the stylist, the occasional soft instruction. For men, while often less overtly flamboyant than the most extreme female styles, hair was also highly significant. During many periods, men grew their hair long and wore it in a top knot or bun, often secured with a pin or covered with a cap or headdress, appropriate to their rank and profession. The Q hairstyle, enforced on Han Chinese men by the Manchu rulers during the Qing dynasty, a shaved forehead with a long braid at the back, is a particularly well-known example of hair being used as a powerful symbol of political submission and cultural identity. The refusal to adopt the Q was seen as an act of rebellion and was often punishable by death. So, hair wasn't just about looking good, it could be a matter of life and death. A stark contrast to simply worrying about a bad hair day. These intricate coiffures, whether the towering creations of Tang court ladies or the symbolic Q of the Qing era, tell us so much about the society that created them. They speak of aesthetic preferences, yes, but also of social hierarchies, gender roles, political power, and the human love for intricate craftsmanship. It makes your own morning hair routine seem wonderfully simple, doesn't it? Just imagine the effort involved day after day to maintain such a visible and complex marker of your place in the world. It's a testament to the human capacity for artistic expression, even in the most personal of realms. From the towering constructions of hair, our journey now takes us to the fingertips, to another fascinating and highly visible symbol of status in Imperial China. Incredibly long fingernails, often protected and adorned by ornate nail guards. You're now perhaps observing a noblewoman or a high-ranking scholar, their hands held in a delicate, almost ceremonial manner. What immediately draws your eye are not rings or bracelets, but the nails themselves, cultivated to astonishing lengths, sometimes several inches long, curving gently like pale talons. These weren't just any nails, these were declarations. They were living proof that the owner did not, and could not, engage in any form of manual labour. Their hands were purely ornamental, a testament to a life of leisure and privilege. The cultivation of long fingernails was a practice predominantly seen among the elite, both men and women, though it's perhaps more famously associated with aristocratic women. Growing such nails required immense care and patience. They were, of course, extremely fragile. A moment of carelessness, a snag on a silk robe could mean disaster, a broken nail that had taken months, even years, to grow. To prevent such calamities, and also to further embellish these prized possessions, elaborate nail guards, or zijia tao, were worn. These guards, often exquisitely crafted, slipped over the individual nails, providing protection and an extra layer of ostentatious display. It's a far cry from your quick application of nail polish, isn't it? These nail guards were works of art in themselves, a mainstream historical fact. During the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1912, the use of these decorative nail guards became particularly prominent among Manchu noblewomen. Empress Dowager Cixi, one of the most powerful figures of the late Qing period, was famously depicted and photographed wearing incredibly long nail guards, some reportedly up to 6 inches in length, on her little and ring fingers. These became iconic symbols of her power and imperial status. You could almost say her fingernails wielded as much authority as her edicts. The materials used for these guards were as luxurious as you might imagine: gold, silver, gilded bronze, tortoiseshell, jade, ivory, and enamel. They were often intricately detailed with filigree work, inlaid with precious stones like pearls, rubies, sapphires, or turquoise, or adorned with carved motifs of auspicious symbols such as dragons, phoenixes, bats, a symbol of good fortune, or flowers. Some were even enamelled with vibrant colours. Imagine a hand already distinguished by its unnaturally long nails, further accentuated by these glittering jewel-encrusted sheaths. It was a conspicuous display of wealth, a clear visual shorthand for, "I don't have to lift a finger." That's not just an idiom, it was a lived reality for these individuals. The quirky tidbit here is that sometimes these nail guards were so long and elaborate that they effectively rendered the wearer's hands almost useless for practical tasks. Eating, dressing, even simple gestures would have to be adapted or performed with the assistance of servants. It reinforces the idea that the impracticality was the point. It's a bit like the most extreme forms of high fashion today, beautiful to look at perhaps, but entirely unsuited for everyday life. The longer and more encumbered your nails, the more servants you clearly had at your disposal. It's a subtle, yet incredibly effective form of social signalling. Why such an emphasis on long nails? Historians still argue whether the practice was purely a status symbol, or if it also held deeper spiritual or symbolic meanings. Some theories suggest that long nails were associated with scholars and a life of contemplation, indicating hands unsullied by physical work and dedicated to intellectual pursuits. For women, it amplified the sense of delicacy and refinement, aligning with Confucian ideals of feminine grace and restraint. The nails themselves, being essentially dead keratin, might also have been seen as a way of cultivating something that endured, a slow, patient growth, mirroring perhaps the accumulation of wisdom or status over time. It's a fascinating concept, that something so seemingly passive could convey so much. Of course, maintaining such nails, even with guards, was a challenge. They would need to be carefully cleaned and possibly oiled to prevent them from becoming too brittle. Breakage was a constant concern, and for those who didn't use guards, or only used them on certain fingers, the risk was even higher. It makes you wonder about the daily anxieties involved. You're trying to enjoy a cup of tea, and your primary concern is whether you might chip a nail that represents years of careful cultivation. It adds a whole new layer to the concept of high maintenance. The visual is quite striking, isn't it? These elongated, protected fingers, perhaps resting delicately on a silk cushion, or gesturing slowly in conversation. It's a world away from the practical working hands that built the empires and tilled the fields. It's a beauty ideal that is, by its very nature, exclusive and unattainable for the vast majority of the population. Much like the lead-white skin we discussed earlier, it's a marker of a life removed from the mundane realities of survival. And just imagine the sound they might make, a soft clicking or tapping, the gentle chime of gold against porcelain. It's the sound of untouchable elegance. This practice, so visually arresting and so deeply symbolic, offers another window into the intricate social codes of Imperial China. It's a reminder that beauty standards are not just about aesthetics. They're about power, class, and the constant, subtle negotiation of one's place in the social hierarchy. The long nail wasn't just a nail, it was a silent, eloquent proclamation. Leaving the glittering, protected fingertips of Chinese nobility, our journey now takes a sharp turn eastward, across the sea to ancient Japan. You find yourself in a different setting, perhaps a traditional Japanese home with tatami mats and shoji screens, or observing a formal ceremony. Here, a striking and, to many modern sensibilities, rather surprising beauty ideal once held sway: the practice of dyeing one's teeth black, known as ohaguro, or chihei. Yes, you read that correctly. Instead of striving for pearly whites, for centuries, many Japanese women, and sometimes men, deliberately stained their teeth a deep, lustrous black. It's a fascinating counterpoint to the Western obsession with bright white smiles, and it challenges our assumptions about what constitutes dental aesthetics. The practice of ohaguro has a long and rich history in Japan, dating back to at least the Kofun period, 250 to 538 AD, with evidence found on Haniwa burial figures, and it continued, with varying popularity and social significance, right up until the Meiji era in the late 19th century, when the government officially banned it as part of its modernization and westernization efforts. Mainstream historical fact: ohaguro was practiced by a wide range of social classes, though its specific connotations varied. It was common among aristocratic women, samurai, married women in general, geishas, and even some commoners, particularly in urban areas. For married women, it was often seen as a symbol of fidelity and marital status, a sign that they were no longer seeking other suitors. The process of achieving that perfect lacquer-like blackness was quite specific. The primary ingredient was a dark brown solution of ferric acetate called kanamizu, made by dissolving iron filings in vinegar. When this solution was combined with vegetable tannins from sources like gallnuts from sumac trees or tea powder, it would react to produce a rich black dye that also had the benefit of being water resistant. The mixture was often painted onto the teeth daily or every few days using a soft brush made of feathers or bristles. It wasn't a permanent dye in the sense of a tattoo, but rather a coating that needed regular reapplication to maintain its depth of colour and sheen. Imagine the slightly metallic, vinegar taste, probably not the most pleasant way to start your day, but dedication to the look was paramount. Why black teeth? The reasons are multifaceted and evolved over time. One of the most commonly cited practical benefits was that the dye actually helped to protect the teeth from decay and strengthen the enamel. The iron and tannins had antimicrobial properties, and the lacquer-like coating could seal out bacteria. So, in a way, it was an early form of dental sealant, albeit a very conspicuous one. Quirky tidbit: because the ohaguro mixture was often quite acidic and could have an unpleasant smell and taste, various spices like cloves, cinnamon or anise were sometimes added to the concoction to make it more palatable or to perfume the breath. It's like they were trying to make their dental varnish into a potpourri. Beyond the practical, there were strong aesthetic and symbolic reasons. In a culture that highly valued pale skin, much like ancient China, though perhaps not always achieved with lead, blackened teeth provided a striking contrast, making the white skin of the face appear even whiter and more luminous. Some scholars suggest that a wide smile revealing bright white teeth might have been seen as too animalistic or unrefined. Black teeth, on the other hand, concealed the natural colour and form of the teeth, creating a more serene, enigmatic, and, to the contemporary eye, more sophisticated expression. Historians still argue whether the aesthetic appeal was primarily about the contrast with white skin, or if it was linked to a broader appreciation for things that were dark, lacquered and unchanging, which were valued in Japanese aesthetics. Think of lacquerware, for instance. The practice also served as a clear social signifier. For married women, it was a public declaration of their status. For geishas, whose white face makeup often made their natural teeth appear yellow by comparison, ohaguro created a more harmonious and striking look. Samurai warriors also sometimes practiced ohaguro, possibly as a display of loyalty, or as a way to appear more fearsome, or perhaps simply as part of the aristocratic customs they emulated. It's interesting how a single practice could carry different shades of meaning for different groups within the same society. The visual effect must have been quite dramatic. Imagine a woman with a pale, powdered face, brightly rouged lips, and then, when she smiled or spoke, a flash of gleaming black teeth. It's a look that is so different from Western ideals that it can be hard for us to initially process as beautiful, but within its cultural context, it was a mark of elegance, maturity, and refinement. It's a powerful reminder of how culturally conditioned our perceptions of beauty truly are. You probably wouldn't swipe right on a dating profile featuring a black-toothed smile today, but in Heian-era Japan, it might have been the height of allure. The decline of ohaguro in the late 19th century was a direct result of Japan's opening to the West and its desire to be seen as a modern nation. Western visitors often found the practice strange or even repellent, and as Japan adopted Western dress, customs and technologies, traditional practices like ohaguro, and for that matter certain hairstyles and forms of makeup, began to be seen as old-fashioned or even barbaric by the new Meiji government, eager to impress the outside world. It's a common story. Cultural practices that have endured for centuries can be swept away relatively quickly under the tide of external influence and perceived progress. Yet for nearly a millennium, black teeth were a common and often admired sight in Japan, a beauty ritual that combined practicality with profound cultural symbolism. It makes you think about all the subtle, and not so subtle ways we modify our teeth today. Whitening, straightening, veneers. Are our current dental aesthetics any less culturally constructed than ohaguro? Perhaps just different. From the intriguing practice of ohaguro in Japan, we now shift our focus, though we remain in the land of the rising sun, to another iconic and highly stylized form of beauty, the striking white makeup, or oshiroi, of the geisha. You're perhaps in the quiet traditional district of Gion in Kyoto, catching a glimpse of a geisha, or a maiko, apprentice geisha, gliding gracefully down a narrow street. Her kimono is a work of art, her hair impeccably styled, but it's her face that often captures the most immediate attention. A flawless, opaque white mask, accented by vivid red lips and delicately lined eyes. This isn't just makeup, it's a transformation, a carefully constructed persona that speaks of artistry, tradition, and a world set apart. The thick white foundation traditionally used by geishas, and before them by court ladies and kabuki actors, was historically made from rice powder, but like their Chinese counterparts, some formulations also incorporated white lead. Remember that dangerous quest for a ghostly pallor? It found its echoes here too, with similar risks of lead poisoning for those who used it regularly over long periods. However, by the early 20th century, safer, non-toxic white pigments began to replace the lead-based versions, though the iconic look remained. The application of this oshiroi is a meticulous, ritualized process. It's not just slapped on, it's smoothed carefully over the face, neck and upper chest, creating a stark, almost doll-like canvas. A mainstream historical fact: the distinctive way geishas apply their white makeup, particularly leaving a W-sir or V-shaped patch of unpainted skin at the nape of the neck, called eriashi, is considered a highly erotic and alluring detail in traditional Japanese aesthetics. This unpainted area creates a visual contrast and emphasizes the mask-like quality of the makeup, drawing attention to the sensuality of the neck, which was traditionally considered a point of beauty. Similarly, a small area of unpainted skin is often left around the hairline, giving the impression that the white face is a mask being worn. The white face serves multiple symbolic purposes. Firstly, in a world before bright electric lighting, the white makeup would have made the geisha's face more visible and luminous in the dim, candlelit rooms where they entertained. It helped their features stand out, almost like a performer on a subtly lit stage. Secondly, the white mask creates an air of serene, idealized femininity. It smooths away individual imperfections and transforms the wearer into a more archetypal figure of beauty and grace. It's about transcending the everyday and embodying an artistic ideal. You're not just seeing a woman, you're seeing a living piece of art. The quirky tidbit here relates to the eyebrows and lips. After the white foundation is applied, the eyebrows are traditionally drawn in with charcoal, often with a touch of red, and they might be painted higher on the forehead than the natural brow line, contributing to the stylized, mask-like appearance. The lips are painted smaller than their natural shape, typically using a vibrant red pigment derived from safflower petals, beni. For Maiko, only the lower lip might be painted red in their first year, a subtle signifier of their apprenticeship stage. It's these small, deliberate details that add layers of meaning to the overall look. It's almost like a secret code if you know how to read it. The process of becoming a geisha, including mastering the art of applying this makeup, takes years of training. It's not just about looking beautiful, it's about embodying a whole host of traditional Japanese arts: dance, music, conversation, and the art of hospitality. The makeup is an integral part of this persona. Historians still argue whether the geisha's white makeup primarily serves to de-individualize the woman, turning her into a beautiful object, or if it empowers her by allowing her to inhabit a respected artistic role that grants her a degree of independence and agency not always available to other women in historical Japanese society. Perhaps it's a delicate balance of both, a complex interplay of tradition and individual artistry. Imagine the sensation of wearing such thick makeup for hours on end. It must create a very distinct feeling, a barrier almost between the wearer and the world. The skill involved in the application is considerable. The lines must be precise, the coverage even. The red and black accents on the eyes and lips must be perfectly placed to achieve the desired effect of serene yet captivating beauty. It's a far cry from a quick 5-minute makeup routine. This is dedication, this is ritual, this is performance, even before the first song is sung or the first dance step taken. The contrast between the stark white foundation and the vivid red and black accents is incredibly dramatic. It's a visual language that has been refined over centuries, and while the specific ingredients may have evolved for safety reasons, the aesthetic itself has remained remarkably consistent, a testament to its enduring power and cultural significance. It makes you wonder if our modern no-makeup looks will have such longevity, or if they'll just be a fleeting blip in the grand history of human adornment. One might wager on the geisha's look having more staying power. The geisha's white mask, then, is far more than just a cosmetic choice. It's a symbol of a unique cultural institution, a mark of artistic dedication, and a visually stunning example of how makeup can be used to create not just beauty, but an entire persona. It invites you to look beyond the surface, to appreciate the artistry and tradition that lie beneath that flawless white canvas. It's a beauty that is both timeless and deeply rooted in a specific cultural moment, a perfect harmony of form and meaning. Leaving the serene, white-masked world of the Japanese geisha, we now slip back across the waters to China, but this time we're granted a rare, almost furtive glimpse into the most exclusive of boudoirs. Those within the Forbidden City, the heavily guarded Imperial Palace in Beijing. Here, surrounded by opulent silks, priceless jades, and the constant hum of courtly intrigue, the emperors, empresses, and favoured concubines had access to cosmetic recipes and beauty treatments that were the stuff of legend, often closely guarded secrets, and sometimes delightfully bizarre. You're not just in any noble's chamber now, you're where imperial power dictated even the ingredients in a face cream. The pursuit of beauty within the Forbidden City was, as you can imagine, taken to an entirely new level. With seemingly limitless resources and a burning desire to maintain youth, allure, and an aura of almost divine perfection, the imperial family and their chosen companions experimented with and indulged in an astonishing array of concoctions. Many of these were based on traditional Chinese medicine principles, aiming to balance the body's energies and promote beauty from within, as well as enhance it externally. But alongside the sensible herbal remedies, there were some truly eyebrow-raising ingredients. Remember that lead face powder we discussed? It was certainly present here, likely in its most refined and expensive forms, but the quest for exotic and potent materials went much further. A mainstream historical fact, Empress Dowager Cixi, who we met earlier with her astonishing nail guards, was renowned for her elaborate beauty regimen, which she maintained well into her old age. Historical records and court memoirs detail her use of powdered pearls, taken internally and applied externally for skin luminosity, jade rollers, yes, they're not a new invention, and complex herbal baths and teas. She also reputedly had a team of physicians and attendants dedicated solely to preserving her appearance. It was a serious state-level affair to keep the Empress looking her best. Imagine the pressure on those poor cosmetic chemists of the court, now for the quirky and sometimes downright strange. Some imperial cosmetic recipes reportedly included ingredients like deer antler, believed to promote vitality, placenta, both human and animal, for rejuvenation, a practice that still has niche modern proponents, bird's nest soup made from swiftlet nests prized for skin health, and even more esoteric substances. There were tales of face masks made with a blend of powdered mother-of-pearl, ginseng, and, according to some more whispered accounts, ingredients that might make you squirm a little, like bat droppings, considered good for clearing blemishes, or earthworms, for skin smoothing. You can almost picture a nervous court alchemist, presenting a new, slightly dubious-sounding lotion to a sceptical concubine, hoping it delivers on its promise of eternal youth without any unfortunate side effects. Your Highness, I assure you, the pulverized cicada shell adds a delightful sheen. The imperial kitchens and pharmacies were constantly at work, not just preparing food and medicine, but also the raw materials for these beauty treatments. Flowers like jasmine, osmanthus, rose, and chrysanthemum were not just for decoration. Their petals were distilled for fragrant waters infused into oils or powdered for blushes and scented sachets. Ginseng, a revered ingredient in Chinese medicine, was a staple, believed to promote overall health and, by extension, a radiant complexion. Pearls, as mentioned, were ground into fine powders, supposedly to lighten the skin and reduce wrinkles. The sheer opulence is staggering. If it was rare, expensive, and rumoured to have beautifying properties, you can bet it found its way into an imperial cosmetic pot. Historians still argue whether the more outlandish ingredients in some reported imperial recipes were genuinely effective, based on some unknown traditional wisdom, or if they were more a product of superstition, extreme exclusivity, the rarer the ingredient the more potent it must be, or even embellishment in later accounts. It's hard to separate fact from folklore when dealing with such closely guarded secrets. Were these empresses truly benefiting from, say, a dusting of powdered jade? Or was it the power of belief and the luxurious ritual itself that contributed to their perceived flawlessness? The exclusivity was key. These weren't recipes you'd find in a common market stall, they were developed for and used by the select few at the very apex of society. The knowledge was often passed down orally, or in private manuscripts within the palace walls. To have access to these treatments was another mark of supreme status, a privilege as potent as any jewel or title. It makes you think about the secret ingredients touted in high-end modern cosmetics. Perhaps the allure of the exclusive and the mysterious is a timeless marketing strategy. The Forbidden City wasn't just a seat of power, it was a microcosm of intense aesthetic competition. Concubines vied for the emperor's favour, and beauty was a powerful weapon in that arsenal. Therefore, the quest for the most effective, most youth-preserving, most enchanting cosmetic was relentless. You can imagine the whispers, the exchanged secrets, perhaps even a touch of sabotage, a rival's face powder accidentally swapped for something less effective, or worse. The stakes were incredibly high. A new wrinkle could mean a fall from grace, while a particularly radiant complexion might catch the Imperial eye. It's a bit like a high-stakes reality TV show, but with significantly more brocade and potentially more ground-up rare minerals. These Imperial beauty secrets, a blend of traditional medicine, luxurious indulgence, and sometimes baffling experimentation, offer a fascinating glimpse into a world where beauty was not just a personal concern, but an affair of state. It highlights the incredible lengths to which humans will go in the pursuit of an ideal, especially when backed by almost unlimited resources and the immense pressure to embody perfection. Leaving the gilded cages and closely guarded cosmetic secrets of the Forbidden City, let's immerse ourselves now in a more fragrant and pervasive aspect of ancient Chinese beauty rituals, the art of perfumery and the luxurious practice of aromatic incense baths. You're no longer focused on a single face or a specific body part, but enveloped in a cloud of subtle, carefully crafted scents. Imagine stepping into a wealthy household or a refined, scholarly retreat. The air itself is a component of the aesthetic, carrying delicate notes of sandalwood, jasmine, orchid, or perhaps the deeper, more mysterious aroma of agarwood or musk. This wasn't just about smelling nice. It was about creating an atmosphere, cultivating a personal aura, and even purifying the mind and spirit. The use of fragrances in China has an incredibly ancient history, dating back thousands of years. Initially, aromatic plants and resins were primarily burned as incense in religious ceremonies and ancestral rites, to purify spaces, honour deities, and create a sacred atmosphere. Mainstream historical fact: during the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 220 AD, the use of incense and perfumes expanded significantly beyond purely religious contexts, becoming an integral part of daily life for the elite, used for personal adornment, scenting clothes and rooms, and in medicinal practices. The Silk Road played a crucial role in bringing exotic aromatics like frankincense, myrrh, and spikenard from distant lands to China, enriching the perfumer's palette. Personal perfumery was highly sophisticated. Instead of dabbing liquid perfume directly onto the skin as we often do today, ancient Chinese practices often involved scenting one's clothing. Small, intricately carved pomanders or sachets, qiangbao or qiangnang, filled with fragrant powders, dried flowers, herbs and aromatic woods like sandalwood or camphor would be tucked into sleeves, hung from belts, or placed among robes in storage chests. This created a subtle, lingering fragrance that moved with the wearer, a gentle olfactory signature rather than a overwhelming blast of scent. It's a much more understated approach to perfume than a spritz from an atomizer, don't you think? Then there were the aromatic baths. For those who could afford it, bathing was not merely a cleansing ritual but a luxurious sensory experience. Bathwater would be infused with fragrant flower petals. Orchids, lotuses, chrysanthemums were popular, or with decoctions of aromatic herbs and woods. Imagine sinking into a warm, steaming bath, the water fragrant with the essence of a blooming garden. It was believed that these aromatic baths not only cleansed the body, but also relaxed the mind, soothed the spirit, and could even impart a delicate, lasting fragrance to the skin. It's the original aromatherapy spa day, right in your own home, if your home happened to be rather well appointed. The quirky tidbit here is the existence of incense clocks, jianzhong or qiaxiang yin. These were ingenious devices that burned specially formulated trails of powdered incense to measure time. Different scents could even be used to mark different hours or periods of the day. So not only was your environment beautifully scented, but your very perception of time could be intertwined with fragrance. Imagine knowing it's mid-afternoon, because the air now carries a hint of plum blossom instead of the earlier jasmine. It's a wonderfully poetic way to live, though perhaps not ideal if you have a very sensitive nose or allergies. Oh dear, is that the meeting with the tax collector incense I smell? The ingredients used were diverse and often imbued with symbolic meaning. Orchids, for example, were associated with elegance and refinement. Plum blossoms blooming in winter symbolised resilience and purity. Sandalwood was prized for its calming, meditative qualities. Musk, derived from the glands of the musk deer, was a powerful and long-lasting fixative, considered highly alluring, though its sourcing raises ethical concerns for us today. Agar wood, also known as oud, a resinous wood formed in aquilaria trees when they become infected with a specific type of mould, was, and still is, one of the most precious and sought-after aromatics, prized for its complex, rich and spiritually uplifting scent. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation behind the extensive use of personal and environmental fragrances was purely aesthetic pleasure, or if it was more deeply rooted in traditional Chinese medicinal concepts of qi, vital energy, and the belief that specific aromas could positively influence health, mood, and even fortune. Many aromatic substances were indeed key components in traditional remedies used to open the orifices, dispel pathogenic influences, or harmonise bodily functions. So, smelling good might have also been considered a form of preventative healthcare. The creation of perfumes and incense was a skilled art. Perfumers, often closely associated with physicians or alchemists, experimented with blending different raw materials to achieve the perfect balance and desired effect. They understood the principles of distillation, enfleurage, extracting scents using fats, and maceration. The resulting products, powders, pastes, infused oils, and carefully shaped incense sticks or cones, were often stored in beautiful ceramic, jade, or lacquer containers. So you see, the ancient Chinese engagement with beauty wasn't limited to what could be seen. It profoundly involved the sense of smell. It was about creating a complete sensory environment, where fragrance played a vital role in personal presentation, social ritual, and even spiritual well-being. It makes our modern habit of quickly spraying on some cologne before rushing out the door seem rather utilitarian by comparison. Theirs was a world where scent was woven into the very fabric of life, a subtle but powerful tool for cultivating beauty, tranquility, and a sense of refined living. You can almost breathe in that ancient air, a gentle perfume of history itself. As the fragrant mists of incense baths begin to dissipate, let's bring our focus back to the face, specifically to a feature that has been shaped, plucked, painted, and pondered over for millennia: the eyebrows. In ancient China, as in many cultures, eyebrows were far from a mere afterthought. They were a key element of facial aesthetics, capable of conveying emotion, character, and crucially adherence to prevailing fashion. You're now perhaps observing a woman at her bronze mirror, a collection of small tools and pigments laid out before her, as she prepares to transform her natural brows into a work of art. And some of the fashionable shapes, well, they might surprise you. Forget the natural feathered look or the bold, defined arches popular today. Ancient Chinese eyebrow fashions went through a fascinating array of trends, some of which were highly stylized and deliberately artificial. Mainstream historical fact: during the Tang dynasty, a period we've noted for its opulent beauty standards, a wide variety of elaborate eyebrow shapes were in vogue. These had wonderfully evocative names like distant mountain brows, long and slender, tapering elegantly, willow leaf brows, delicate and gracefully curved, or drooping pearl brows. But perhaps the most intriguing, and the one we'll linger on, is the moth and tenny brow, or silkworm moth brow. Yes, you heard that right. Women would pluck or shave their natural eyebrows and then, using a dark pigment, often a black or dark grey ink-like substance called dye, they would paint on new eyebrows in shapes that mimicked the delicate feathery antennae of a silkworm moth. These could be short and slightly fuzzy, or slender and arched, often with a slightly blurred soft focus effect. It's a look that is so specific and so far removed from our current ideals that it's captivatingly strange. Imagine the dedication, removing your own brows to replace them with tiny painted insect feelers. It's a bold fashion statement, to say the least. One hopes they weren't trying to attract actual moths. That's a joke, of course, but the imagery is quite striking. The pigments used for painting these fashionable brows were varied. Dye was a common choice, often made from soot. Pine soot was favoured for its deep black colour, mixed with a binder, or from minerals like manganese oxide. Sometimes a greenish-black pigment derived from roasted indigo plants, known as qing dye, was used, giving a subtly different hue. The application required a steady hand and a fine brush. The aim was to create a specific fashionable shape that complemented the overall makeup look, especially that pale lead-white face and the rouged lips. The eyebrows were crucial for framing the eyes and conveying expression, even if that expression was one of highly stylized fashionable ennui. The quirky tidbit here is that the popularity of certain eyebrow shapes could sometimes be traced back to a specific imperial consort, or a famous beauty, whose look was then emulated throughout the court and beyond. If the emperor's favourite concubine decided that short, upward tilting brows were the new chic, you can bet that tweezers and pots of D would be working overtime across the capital. It's like an ancient form of influencer culture, but instead of Instagram, the trends were set by imperial decree or courtly favour. Did you see Lady May's new startled fawn eyebrows? We simply must try them. Why such artificial and sometimes bizarre shapes? Historians still argue whether these highly stylized eyebrows were purely about fashion and novelty, or if they carried deeper symbolic meanings related to femininity, allure, or even specific poetic or literary allusions. The moth, for instance, undergoes transformation and is associated with a delicate ephemeral beauty. Were the moth antennae brows meant to evoke a similar sense of fragile, captivating charm? Or was it simply that someone influential thought it looked good, and the trend caught on, much like any other fashion fad throughout history? The tools for eyebrow grooming were important. Small tweezers for plucking stray hairs, tiny scissors for trimming, and of course the fine brushes for painting. Bronze mirrors, often highly polished, provided the necessary reflection for this detailed work. It was a daily ritual for many women of standing, and it wasn't just about removal and painting, shaping the remaining natural. Brow hairs, if any were left, was also part of the process. Some styles involved leaving a very thin, arched line, while others required the complete removal of the natural brow to create a blank canvas for the artist's work. This practice of painting artificial eyebrows wasn't unique to the moth antennae style. Throughout Chinese history there were periods where eyebrows were painted thick and bold, others where they were thin and ethereal. The desired aesthetic shifted with the dynasties and with prevailing cultural moods. What remained consistent was the understanding that eyebrows were a powerful expressive tool and a key component of a fashionable face. It makes you look at your own eyebrows and wonder what a Tang Dynasty fashion critic would make of them. Probably declare them hopelessly last millennium. The painted moth eyebrows, in all their delicate strangeness, serve as a wonderful example of how beauty standards can be incredibly specific and culturally relative. They challenge our notions of what is natural or attractive, and remind us that fashion, even in facial features, can be a playful, artistic, and sometimes quite eccentric endeavour. It's a world where your face truly was your canvas, and your eyebrows were a chance to make a very particular, very fashionable statement. Having marvelled at the painted moth antennae eyebrows, let's now delve beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, to explore another crucial aspect of ancient Chinese beauty philosophy: the belief that true, lasting beauty originated from within. You're no longer just observing the external applications of powders and pigments, but are now in a scholar's study or an apothecary's shop, surrounded by an intriguing array of dried herbs, roots, fungi, and minerals. Here, the focus is on achieving radiance through internal balance and health, using carefully formulated herbal elixirs, teas, and dietary regimens. This holistic approach, deeply rooted in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, saw external appearance as a direct reflection of the body's internal harmony or discord. The core principle was that if your qi, or vital life energy, was flowing smoothly, your blood was well nourished, and your organs were functioning optimally, your skin would naturally be clear and glowing, your hair lustrous and your eyes bright. Conversely, blemishes, dull skin, or premature aging were seen as outward signs of an internal imbalance. So, rather than just masking imperfections, the emphasis was often on correcting the underlying cause through tailored concoctions. Mainstream historical fact: texts on Chinese herbal medicine dating back over 2,000 years, such as the Shenong Bencao Jing, the Divine Farmer's Materia Medica, list numerous plants and substances with properties believed to enhance beauty, by tonifying the blood, nourishing the organs, or clearing heat and dampness. TCM concepts related to inflammation or stagnation. These weren't just vague notions of eating healthy. The prescriptions could be highly specific, often tailored to an individual's particular constitution and symptoms. For example, goji berries. Wolfberries were, and still are, widely consumed for their reputed benefits to the eyes and skin, believed to nourish the liver and kidneys. Jujube dates were used to tonify the spleen and stomach, promoting good digestion and blood production, leading to a rosy complexion. Astragalus root was taken to boost ki and strengthen the immune system, contributing to overall vitality and a healthy glow. You can imagine someone sipping a carefully brewed tea, not just for refreshment, but as a daily dose of beautifying medicine. It's like a skincare routine you can drink. The quirky tidbit here involves some of the more, shall we say, premium ingredients that were believed to offer exceptional beauty benefits. We've touched on powdered pearls being ingested for skin luminosity. Another prized and very expensive ingredient was bird's nest, specifically the nests of swiftlets, made from their hardened saliva. Consumed as a soup, it was believed to improve skin texture, reduce wrinkles, and promote a youthful complexion. Imagine paying a small fortune for what is essentially bird spit soup, all in the name of beauty. Then there was Hishu Wu, Fallopia multiflora or foti, a herb famously reputed to prevent greying hair and even restore dark colour to hair that had already turned grey, as well as promoting longevity and vitality. Legends abound of ancient sages who lived for centuries with jet black hair thanks to this herb. Whether it truly reversed greying is debatable, but its reputation was formidable. The preparation of these elixirs and beauty-enhancing foods was an art in itself. Herbs might be decocted, simmered for a long time to extract their properties, infused as teas, ground into powders to be mixed with honey or rice wine, or incorporated into soups and congees. The timing of when to take certain remedies could also be important, aligning with the body's natural rhythms according to TCM principles. Historians still argue whether the perceived efficacy of many of these herbal beauty treatments was primarily due to their actual pharmacological properties. Many traditional herbs do contain bioactive compounds, or if the placebo effect, combined with the overall healthier lifestyle, often associated with such regimens, good diet, adequate rest, stress management, played a more significant role. It's likely a combination, with some herbs having demonstrable benefits, and others working more subtly on the mind-body connection. This internal approach didn't mean external treatments were neglected, but they were often seen as complementary. For instance, after drinking your goji berry and jujube tea, you might then apply a face mask made with powdered mung beans to cool and detoxify the skin, or ground almonds to gently exfoliate and nourish. The idea was to work from both the inside out and the outside in, creating a synergistic effect. It's a wonderfully integrated vision of beauty and wellness, something modern, holistic health movements are increasingly re-embracing. It makes you think twice about relying solely on a topical cream when your diet consists mainly of instant noodles and stress. Consider the vast knowledge accumulated over centuries about the properties of different plants and natural substances. Apothecaries and physicians were like walking encyclopedias of this herbal lore. They understood which herbs were cooling or warming, which ones tonified or dispersed, and how to combine them to achieve specific results without causing unwanted side effects. This wasn't just random plant picking, it was a sophisticated system of medicine that viewed the body and nature as interconnected. So, while the lead powders and painted eyebrows offered a more immediate visible transformation, these herbal elixirs represented a deeper, more long-term investment in one's beauty and health. It was about cultivating a radiance that shone from within, a beauty that was not just skin-deep but was a testament to a balanced and well-nourished life. It's a philosophy that suggests true allure comes from vitality, not just artifice. And who wouldn't want a bit of that ancient wisdom in their teacup? As we steep in the wisdom of ancient Chinese herbal elixirs, understanding that beauty was cultivated from the inside out, let's now turn to a tool that bridges this internal focus with external application, a surprisingly ancient device that has seen a remarkable resurgence in modern skincare, the jade roller. You're perhaps back in an elegant boudoir, or maybe even a scholar's quiet study where moments of self-care are cherished. On a polished wooden table, beside porcelain pots of cream and fragrant oils, lies a cool, smooth implement, a small roller, often made of jade or another semi-precious stone, designed to be gently glided across the face. It feels wonderfully familiar, doesn't it? Almost like you've seen it on a beauty influencer's feed just yesterday. The use of jade and other stones for therapeutic and beautifying purposes has a long and venerable history in China. Jade, in particular, holds immense cultural significance, valued far more than gold or silver. It's associated with purity, wisdom, longevity, and good health. It was believed to possess protective and healing properties, capable of balancing qi and promoting harmony. Mainstream historical fact. Archaeological evidence, including jade tools and ornaments found in tombs, suggests that jade has been revered and utilised in China for at least 7,000 years. While specific dating of the first facial rollers made of jade is a bit more nebulous, the practice of using jade for skincare and massage is believed to have been a luxurious ritual among the Chinese elite, particularly women of the imperial court and wealthy families, for many centuries, certainly flourishing by the Qing dynasty if not earlier. These ancient rollers were not so different in basic design from their modern counterparts. Typically they consisted of a larger oblong stone for the broader areas of the face like the cheeks, forehead and jawline, and sometimes a smaller, rounder stone at the other end for the delicate under-eye area, or around the nose. The stones would be polished to a high sheen and attached to a handle, also sometimes made of jade or another fine material. The sensation of the cool stone gliding over the skin would have been instantly soothing and refreshing. Imagine that gentle pressure, the coolness easing tension from the brow or jaw, the smooth surface improving circulation. It's a simple pleasure, but a deeply satisfying one. The quirky tidbit here is that beyond jade, other stones were also used for these facial tools, each believed to have its own unique properties. Rose quartz, for instance, associated with love and emotional healing, might have been chosen for its calming and heart-opening energies. Amethyst, linked to tranquility and spiritual awareness, could have been used for a more meditative self-care ritual. The choice of stone might have been based not just on availability or aesthetic preference, but also on these subtle energetic considerations. It's like having a crystal healing session and a facial massage all in one. You weren't just rolling your face, you were aligning your chakras one cheekbone at a time. So, what were these ancient rollers believed to do? Much like their modern descendants, they were used to promote circulation, reduce puffiness, especially around the eyes, aid in lymphatic drainage, and help skincare products, those precious herbal oils and creams we just discussed, penetrate more deeply into the skin. The coolness of the stone was thought to help tighten pores and soothe inflammation. Regular use was believed to result in a smoother, more toned and radiant complexion. Historians still argue whether the documented benefits of ancient jade rolling were primarily due to the actual physical effects of the massage and the properties of the stone, or if the ritualistic, meditative aspect of the practice also contributed significantly to the user's sense of well-being and perceived beauty. Perhaps the act of taking that time for oneself, the gentle, repetitive motion, was as beneficial as any physiological change. Empress Dowager Cixi, whom we've encountered before with her long nail guards and extensive beauty regimen, was reputedly a great devotee of the jade roller. It's easy to picture her after a long day of courtly duties and political manoeuvring, taking a few moments for this calming ritual, the cool jade easing away the cares of the empire from her brow. The fact that such tools were found among the possessions of the wealthy and powerful speaks to their perceived value. They weren't just pretty trinkets, they were considered essential components of a sophisticated beauty and wellness routine. It's fascinating to see how this ancient practice has been so enthusiastically adopted by the modern beauty world. Walk into any department store or browse online beauty retailers, and you'll find a plethora of jade rollers, rose quartz rollers, amethyst rollers, and more. They're touted for many of the same benefits that were appreciated centuries ago. It's a beautiful example of ancient wisdom finding resonance in contemporary life. It makes you wonder what other lost beauty secrets are out there, waiting to be rediscovered and remarketed to a new generation. Perhaps powdered pearl facials will be the next big thing, though hopefully without the lead this time. The enduring appeal of the jade roller lies in its simplicity and its connection to natural materials. In an age of complex gadgets and synthetic ingredients, there's something inherently attractive about a tool that is so straightforward, so tactile, and so rooted in tradition. It's a little piece of ancient luxury that you can hold in your hand, a reminder that sometimes the most effective beauty solutions are the ones that have stood the test of time. The gentle click of the stone as it rolls, the cool sensation on your skin. It's a quiet conversation with centuries of beauty wisdom. Having explored the cool, smooth touch of ancient Chinese jade rollers, let's now allow our journey to drift southwest, across continents, to the sun-drenched lands of ancient Egypt. Here, under the watchful eyes of pharaohs and gods, another civilization was cultivating its own unique and highly dramatic beauty ideals, particularly when it came to the eyes. You're no longer in a serene Chinese boudoir, but perhaps in a bustling Egyptian marketplace near the Nile, or within the cool stone walls of a temple. The air is different, drier, scented with desert dust, lotus flowers, and the distinctive aroma of frankincense and myrrh. And everywhere you look, or rather everyone who looks at you, has eyes that are strikingly defined, alluring, and powerfully symbolic. The most iconic feature of ancient Egyptian makeup is undoubtedly kohl eyeliner. This thick, dark liner, typically black or dark grey, was applied generously around the entire eye, often extending outwards in an almond or cat-eye shape. It wasn't just a subtle enhancement, it was a bold, dramatic statement, worn by both men and women, and by people of all social classes, from the pharaohs themselves down to common labourers. Mainstream historical fact. The use of kohl in Egypt dates back to pre-dynastic times, around 3500 BC, and continued for millennia, becoming deeply ingrained in their culture and identity. Examples of kohl, along with applicators and grinding palettes, are common finds in ancient Egyptian tombs, indicating its importance both in life and in the afterlife. The kohl itself was not a single substance. The black kohl was primarily made from galena, a dark grey lead sulfide ore which was ground into a fine powder. Green eye makeup, also very popular, particularly in earlier periods, was made from malachite, a green copper carbonate ore. These minerals would be crushed on special stone pallets and then mixed with animal fat, oil or water to create a paste or powder that could be applied with a small stick, often made of wood, ivory or stone. Imagine the scene, grinding these heavy minerals, carefully mixing the paste, the rich, dark pigment ready to transform the face. It's a much more elemental process than unscrewing a modern eyeliner pencil. Now for the quirky tidbit. Beyond the aesthetic appeal of making the eyes appear larger, more defined, and more alluring, think of the iconic eyes of Nefertiti or Tutankhamun, the Egyptians believed that kohl eyeliner had magical and protective properties. They thought it could ward off the evil eye, protect against malevolent spirits, and even prevent eye infections. And here's where it gets really interesting. Modern scientific studies have actually found some basis for this latter belief. The lead-based compounds in ancient Egyptian kohl, when they came into contact with the eye's moisture, would have produced very low levels of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is known to stimulate the immune system, helping to fight off bacterial infections that were likely common in the dusty, flood-prone Nile Valley. So, their magical protection might have had a genuine, albeit perhaps unintentional ophthalmological benefit. It's like they stumbled upon a preventative eye treatment while just trying to look fabulous. The application of kohl was a daily ritual for many. It was believed to protect the eyes from the harsh glare of the desert sun, much like natural sunglasses, and also to deter flies and other insects. The dark outline would have reduced glare, making it easier to see in bright conditions. So it was both cosmetic and highly practical. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for the widespread use of kohl was its beautifying effect, its perceived medicinal protective qualities, or its deep religious and symbolic significance. In all likelihood, it was an inseparable fusion of all three. The eyes were considered windows to the soul, and adorning them was an act laden with meaning. The shapes and styles of kohl application evolved over the long span of Egyptian history. Sometimes the lines were thick and bold, other times more slender and elongated. The cat-eye flick was a perennial favourite, thought to mimic the eyes of the revered feline goddess Bastet. The green malachite makeup was often used on the lower lid, or as an eyeshadow, while the black galena kohl defined the lash lines and brows. Eyebrows too were often plucked or shaved, and then painted on in an idealised arched shape, much like some of the ancient Chinese practices we've discussed, though perhaps with less of the moth antennae whimsy, and more of a strong defined arch. The tools associated with kohl are fascinating in themselves. Small, often beautifully decorated kohl pots made of alabaster, faience or stone held the precious powder or paste. Delicate applicators, sometimes with a slightly bulbous end for smoothing, were used to draw the lines. Grinding palettes, often shaped like animals or geometric designs, show the wear and tear of daily use. These weren't disposable items, they were personal possessions, often cherished and buried with their owners for use in the next life. Comparing the Egyptian kohl tradition with the Chinese lead face powder, it's interesting to note the different uses of lead. While the Chinese sought a pale complexion, potentially at great risk, the Egyptians used lead sulfide around their eyes, which in small, controlled doses as applied, may have offered some protection. Of course, lead is still lead, and high or prolonged exposure would undoubtedly have been harmful, but the specific context and application methods seem to have made a difference. It's a reminder that the danger of an ingredient can be dose-dependent and related to how it's used. The legacy of Egyptian eye makeup is undeniable. The kohl-rimmed eye remains a potent symbol of allure and mystique, echoed in modern makeup trends for millennia. It's a look that speaks of power, divinity, and an ancient, sophisticated understanding of how to enhance and protect one of the body's most expressive features. You can almost feel the desert sun on your face, the cool kohl being applied, transforming your gaze into something timeless and iconic. Having gazed into the kohl-lined eyes of ancient Egypt, let's now steer our journey northwards, across the Mediterranean, to the heart of another mighty empire, Rome. You find yourself no longer in the arid desert or a refined eastern court, but perhaps amidst the bustling forums, lavish bathhouses, or opulent villas of the Roman Republic and later, the Empire. Here, beauty standards were a fascinating blend of influences, Greek ideals of proportion and symmetry, Etruscan traditions, and their own unique, sometimes rather surprising innovations. And just like the other cultures we've visited, the Romans had their share of curious and occasionally questionable beauty rituals. While the ghostly white pallor achieved with lead powder, ceruza as they called it, remember, was also highly prized in Rome, much like in China, Roman women, and some men, employed a whole arsenal of other cosmetics and treatments to achieve their desired look. Mainstream historical fact: Roman public baths, or thermetias, were central to Roman social life and hygiene. These weren't just places to get clean, they were elaborate complexes with hot and cold pools, saunas, gymnasiums, and even libraries. Skincare was an integral part of the bathing ritual, involving scraping the skin with a curved metal tool called a strigil to remove oil and dirt, followed by anointing with oils. This focus on cleanliness and skin health was a foundational aspect of Roman beauty. Beyond the basics, Roman women were avid users of cosmetics. They used chalk powder for a whiter complexion if lead was too expensive or too obviously dangerous, rouge made from ochre, rose petals, or even wine dregs for their cheeks and lips, and soot or powdered antimony, a metallic element, to darken their eyebrows and eyelashes, much like the Egyptians used kohl. But it's in some of their more specific concoctions and practices that things get particularly interesting, and sometimes a bit rustic. You can almost smell the concoctions brewing, a strange mix of flowers, minerals, and things you might more readily associate with a farm. The quirky tidbit for this stop on our journey is the Roman fondness for rather unusual ingredients in their face masks and skin treatments. For instance, crocodile excrement, known as crocodile, was reportedly used in facial masks, believed to have skin smoothing and rejuvenating properties. Yes, you read that correctly. Imagine a wealthy Roman matron, reclining on her chaise lounge, her face slathered in what she hopes is the key to eternal youth, but which is in fact dried reptile dung. It certainly gives new meaning to going green with your skincare. Another popular ingredient for facials was ass's milk. Poppaea Sabina, the wife of Emperor Nero, was famously said to travel with a retinue of 500 asses so she could bathe in their milk daily, believing it preserved the fairness and softness of her skin. Cleopatra, centuries earlier in Egypt, was also renowned for her milk baths, so Poppaea was perhaps taking a leaf out of an already legendary beauty book. Hair care was also a major concern. Blonde hair was particularly fashionable for a time, especially after Roman encounters with Germanic and Gallic peoples. To achieve this, Roman women would use bleaching agents, some of which were rather harsh, like mixtures of ashes, goat fat, and caustic soda, or they would sit in the sun with their hair coated in special lotions. For those who couldn't achieve the desired blonde or who preferred other colours, wigs made from the hair of captured Germanic slaves were highly sought after. It's a rather grim reminder of the human cost behind some fashion trends. If bleaching failed or they wanted a darker look, concoctions made from things like boiled walnuts or leeches stewed in wine were used as hair dyes. You'd really have to want that new hair colour to go the leech route. Historians still argue whether the Roman emphasis on elaborate beautification, particularly during the height of the empire, was a sign of decadence and moral decline, as some contemporary Roman satirists and later Christian writers suggested, or if it was simply a reflection of a wealthy, sophisticated society with the leisure and resources to indulge in such pursuits. Were these practices seen as frivolous, or were they integral to maintaining social status and projecting an image of Roman cultural superiority? The debate mirrors similar discussions about other highly beautified societies. The Roman toolkit for beauty was quite extensive. They had tweezers for hair removal, a smooth, hairless body was generally preferred for women, pumice stones for exfoliating skin and even for whitening teeth, mirrors made of highly polished bronze or silver, and an array of pots, vials, and spatulas for their creams and cosmetics, often made of glass, alabaster or bone. It's not so different from a modern vanity table if you squint a bit and ignore the crocodile poop. You can picture the scene in a wealthy Roman domus, the mistress of the house attended by her ornatrix, a specialised slave hairdresser and beautician, discussing the latest trends from the capital, experimenting with a new skin cream recipe, whispered from a friend who heard it from a cousin, who knows someone who works for an important senator's wife. The desire for beauty, the sharing of tips and tricks, the occasional disastrous experiment, it's a timeless human drama, played out here with a distinctively Roman flavour. It makes you appreciate your own, hopefully less odorous, nightly skincare routine. So, from crocodile dung facials to milk baths and hair dyes, made of questionable ingredients, the Romans certainly weren't afraid to experiment in their pursuit of beauty. Their practices, a mix of the sophisticated and the surprisingly earthy, offer another fascinating chapter in our exploration of how different cultures have defined and strived for their aesthetic ideals. It's a world where practicality and luxury, the mundane and the bizarre, often sat side by side on the dressing table. Leaving the sometimes earthy, sometimes opulent beauty practices of the Roman Empire, let's glide back across the globe, returning to Japan, where we previously encountered the striking traditions of ohaguro, blackened teeth, and the geisha's white mask. Now, we delve into another refined and rather surprising Japanese beauty secret, one that promises porcelain-smooth radiant skin through an ingredient that might make you pause. Nightingale droppings. Yes, you're not misreading. We're talking about bird poop, specifically from the Japanese bush warbler, or uguisu, carefully collected, sanitized and powdered to create a facial treatment known as uguisu no fun, literally nightingale feces. You might find yourself in a traditional Japanese setting, perhaps observing a geisha during her intricate skincare routine, or even in a more common household where this traditional wisdom has been passed down. The product itself, once processed, is a fine, almost odourless powder. It doesn't look like its raw origin, thankfully. This powder would be mixed with water or rice bran to form a paste, and then gently applied to the face as a cleanser or mask. It sounds a bit shocking, doesn't it? Especially after our Roman encounter with Crocodilea. It seems reptiles and birds have both, at different times and places, made unexpected contributions to the beauty industry. The use of nightingale droppings as a skin treatment has a long history in Japan, reportedly dating back to at least the Heian period, 794 to 1185 AD. Mainstream historical fact. It was particularly popular among geishas and kabuki actors, whose heavy white lead-based makeup, remember the oshiroi, could be damaging and difficult to remove. Uguisu no fun was prized for its ability to gently cleanse the skin, remove makeup, lighten blemishes, and leave the complexion exceptionally smooth and bright. It was considered a natural and effective way to counteract the harsh effects of their stage and performance makeup. So, what's the science behind this seemingly bizarre ingredient? The key lies in the nightingale's diet and digestive system. These birds primarily eat insects and berries. Their droppings contain high concentrations of urea and guanine. Urea is a well-known humectant, meaning it helps the skin retain moisture, and it also has exfoliating properties. Guanine, an amino acid, is thought to impart a subtle iridescence or pearly glow to the skin, and it can also help to lighten pigmentation. When the droppings are properly sanitized, traditionally by UV light exposure or careful drying, and powdered, these active components can work their magic on the skin. It's a natural enzymatic exfoliant and cleanser, essentially. Mother Nature's own little chemical peel, delivered by a songbird. The quirky tidbit here is the specific sourcing and cachet of guisu droppings. Not just any bird dropping would do. It had to be from the Japanese bush warbler, a bird celebrated for its beautiful song, which added to the poetic and refined image of the treatment. There were even specific regions in Japan known for producing high-quality uguisu no fun. It wasn't something you'd just scrape off a windowsill. There was an art and a tradition to its collection and preparation. Imagine the marketing. Only the finest, song-enhanced droppings for your delicate complexion. This practice might seem strange to us now, but it fits within a broader tradition in many cultures of using animal-derived products for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Remember the deer antler and placenta in some Chinese Imperial recipes? Or the ass's milk favoured by Cleopatra and Poppaea? Nightingale droppings are part of this long history of looking to the natural world in all its forms for beauty solutions. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of uguisu no fun by geishas was primarily due to its demonstrable effectiveness in dealing with their heavy makeup, or if its rarity and exotic nature also contributed to its allure and prestige as a secret beauty treatment. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a product that actually worked, with an added sprinkle of mystique. The sensation of applying it. Once mixed into a paste, it would likely feel similar to a fine clay mask or a gentle scrub. The lack of strong odour in the processed product was crucial to its acceptability. Users prized it for leaving their skin feeling incredibly soft, smooth, and noticeably brighter. It was seen as a gentle yet powerful way to achieve that coveted, flawless, porcelain complexion that was so highly valued in traditional Japanese aesthetics. You can almost picture a geisha, after a long night of performing, carefully removing her white oshiroi with this special powder, her skin breathing a sigh of relief underneath. It's fascinating how different cultures arrive at such unique solutions. While the West might have been experimenting with harsher chemical peels or abrasive scrubs, the Japanese found a gentler, more organic approach, albeit one that required a certain open-mindedness about ingredients. It makes you wonder what other natural substances with potent skincare benefits are out there, perhaps in equally unexpected places. Just try not to look too suspiciously at your local pigeon population. The tradition of using Nightingale droppings is not entirely lost. Even today, some high-end spas and beauty brands offer geisha facials or products containing sanitized Nightingale excrement, often marketed for its skin lightening and smoothing properties. It's a testament to the enduring appeal of this ancient and admittedly unusual beauty secret. It certainly makes your average oatmeal mask seem rather tame in comparison. Having explored the rather organic, if surprising, skincare secrets of Japan, let's now wing our way back westward, this time landing in Renaissance Europe. You find yourself amidst the burgeoning art, science, and intellectual fervour of cities like Florence, Venice, or Paris, from roughly the 14th to the 17th century. Here, as classical ideals of beauty were being rediscovered and reinterpreted, women, and some men, engaged in their own elaborate, and sometimes alarmingly risky, beauty rituals. While the Renaissance is celebrated for its artistic enlightenment, some of its beauty practices were decidedly in the Dark Ages when it came to safety. Much like in ancient China and Rome, a pale, luminous complexion was highly coveted during the Renaissance. It signified wealth, status, and a life lived away from the sun's browning rays. And, just as we've seen before, one of the primary ways to achieve this was with white lead makeup, often called Venetian cerus, or spirits of Saturn. Remember that insidious powder? It was back with a vengeance, used liberally to create a smooth, porcelain-like mask. Mainstream historical fact: Queen Elizabeth I of England was a famous proponent of this look, using cerus to cover smallpox scars and project an image of timeless, ageless beauty. Her iconic pale face and red wig became a powerful symbol of her reign, but it likely came at a significant cost to her health due to lead poisoning. The desire for this pallor led to some truly dangerous habits. Beyond the lead-based foundations, women would also employ various bleaches and skin-lightening concoctions. Some of these were relatively harmless, like lemon juice or rose water, but others involved harsh chemicals like alum, mercury sublimate, or even arsenic. Yes, arsenic, a well-known poison, was sometimes used in small quantities in wafers or powders, ingested or applied topically, with the belief that it would impart a delicate, almost translucent whiteness to the skin. It's a horrifying thought, deliberately consuming a deadly toxin for a fleeting aesthetic effect. It gives a whole new, sinister meaning to dying for beauty. The quirky tidbit from this era concerns the eyes and lips. To achieve fashionably wide, dilated pupils, considered a sign of allure and beauty, women would use eye drops made from belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. Belladonna literally means beautiful woman in Italian, a direct nod to this cosmetic use. While it did indeed dilate the pupils, giving the eyes a dark, captivating look, belladonna is highly toxic. Repeated use could lead to blurred vision, sensitivity to light, and in larger doses, hallucinations, delirium, and even death. For lips and cheeks, a vibrant red was popular. While some rouges were made from harmless plant-based pigments, like sandalwood or cochineal, crushed insects still used today. Others contained vermilion, a bright red pigment made from mercury sulfide. More mercury. It's like a greatest hits album of toxic heavy metals. It wasn't just the face that received such dangerous attention. Hair was also a major focus. Blonde or reddish gold hair was highly fashionable, particularly in Italy. Women would spend hours sitting in the sun on specially constructed rooftop platforms called solana, their hair spread over wide-brimmed crownless hats, drenched in bleaching concoctions made from ingredients like lye, rhubarb, sulphur, or even horse urine. While perhaps not as immediately life-threatening as ingesting arsenic, these harsh treatments would have severely damaged the hair and scalp. You can just imagine the straw-like texture and the irritated skin afterwards, all for that perfect Botticelli blonde. Historians still argue whether Renaissance women were fully aware of the severe long-term dangers of these substances, or if the intense societal pressure to conform to beauty ideals, coupled with a limited understanding of toxicology, led them to take such risks. Medical knowledge was still developing, and the link between these cosmetics and various ailments like skin lesions, hair loss, tooth decay, neurological damage, and premature death may not have always been clearly understood or accepted. Or perhaps, like with the Chinese lead users, some level of denial or acceptance of risk was involved in the pursuit of beauty and social advancement. The ideal Renaissance beauty was often depicted in art with a high forehead, fair hair, rosy cheeks, red lips, and luminous pale skin. To achieve the high forehead, some women would pluck or shave their hairlines, sometimes quite significantly. Eyebrows were often thin and arched, or sometimes completely plucked and redrawn higher up. It's a look that required considerable and often hazardous effort to maintain. You thought your morning routine was complicated? Imagine having to carefully apply lead, mercury, and belladonna, all while hoping your hair doesn't fall out from the latest bleaching experiment. This period, so celebrated for its artistic achievements, provides a stark reminder of the dangerous lengths people will go to in the name of beauty. The divine complexions and captivating eyes, immortalized in Renaissance portraits, often concealed a reality of toxic exposure and potential suffering. It's a sobering thought that the quest for an idealized appearance could lead to such self-destructive behaviors driven by fashion, societal expectation, and a perhaps misguided faith in the beautifying power of some truly perilous substances. It makes you appreciate the safety regulations on modern cosmetics, doesn't it? Even if reading the ingredient list can still sometimes feel like a chemistry exam. Leaving the poisonous allure of Renaissance cosmetics, let's now turn our attention to a more subtle, yet highly symbolic form of adornment, the artificial beauty mark. You're shifting between eras and locales now, perhaps observing a coquettish lady in 18th century Europe, then glancing back to a tastefully adorned scholar or courtesan in Ming or Qing dynasty China. What connects them is a tiny, deliberately placed dot or patch on the skin, a small embellishment that could speak volumes about fashion, allure, and even carry hidden messages. These weren't accidental blemishes, they were carefully curated accents. In Europe, particularly during the 17th and 18th centuries, artificial beauty marks known as mouches, French for flies, became an incredibly popular fashion accessory. These were small patches of black silk, velvet or taffeta, cut into various shapes: circles, hearts, stars, crescent moons, even tiny carriages or ships for the truly flamboyant. They were glued onto the face, neck, or décolletage. Mainstream historical fact: the placement of these mouches developed into a complex language of love or social signalling. For example, a patch near the eye might signify passion, one on the lip an invitation for a kiss, a heart-shaped patch on the cheek could indicate one was engaged, while a patch on the nose might be seen as saucy or impudent. It was a flirtatious game, played out in miniature on the canvas of the skin. These patches served multiple purposes. They could cover up smallpox scars or blemishes, a common issue in those times, much like Queen Elizabeth's use of ceruse. They also provided a striking contrast against the fashionably pale skin, drawing attention to certain features. And of course, they were a key element of courtly intrigue and romantic communication. Imagine trying to decipher the meaning of a lady's strategically placed mouche across a crowded ballroom. Was that star on her forehead meant to signify majestic, or was she just a fan of astronomy? The potential for misinterpretation must have been delightful. Now, let's compare this with ancient China. While perhaps not as elaborately codified into a language as the European mouche, the strategic use of small, painted marks or the enhancement of natural molds was also a feature of Chinese beauty practices. We've already discussed the painted moth antennae eyebrows, which shows a flair for artificial facial adornment. Beyond that, a strategically placed red dot between the eyebrows, known as a huadian, li huadian, was a popular adornment for women, especially during the Tang dynasty. This could be painted on, or sometimes it was a small applique made of materials like gold foil, feathers, or even fish scales. While often associated with auspiciousness, or simply as a decorative element, its placement certainly drew attention to the eyes and forehead. The quirky tidbit here involves a popular legend about the origin of the huadian. It's said that Princess Xuyang, a daughter of Emperor Wu of Liu Song, was resting under a plum tree when a plum blossom petal drifted down and stuck to her forehead. It looked so beautiful that it inspired a new fashion. Other versions of the story involve different flowers or even insects. Whether true or not, it's a charming origin story that highlights the connection between nature and beauty ideals. So that little red dot wasn't just a dot. It was a flower petal mark, a whisper of poetic fancy. In China, natural moles could also be considered significant, sometimes auspicious or indicative of certain character traits depending on their location. While not strictly artificial, the decision to emphasize or leave a natural mole visible, rather than covering it with thick white powder, could itself be a subtle statement. There wasn't the same elaborate system of cutting patches into specific shapes as in Europe, but the principle of using a small dark mark to enhance allure or draw attention to a feature was certainly understood. Historians still argue whether the primary function of these artificial marks, in both cultures, was purely decorative and flirtatious, or if they also served as a subtle form of social commentary, or even rebellion against overly rigid beauty norms by allowing for individual expression. In societies where women's roles and means of expression could be quite constrained, perhaps these tiny adornments offered a small space for playful self-assertion. Was that tiny velvet crescent moon just a fashion choice, or a subtle wink to a secret society? Probably the former, but it's fun to imagine. The materials for European mouches were readily available. Scraps of luxurious fabrics. They were often carried in small ornate boxes called boîtes à mouches. Applying them would involve a bit of adhesive, perhaps gum arabic, or a simple paste. In China, the pigments for painted marks like the huadian would be similar to those used for eyebrows or lips, mineral or plant-based colours. The effect in both cases was to add a point of interest, a focal point that broke the expanse of the face and drew the viewer's eye. It's a clever trick, really. A tiny detail that can change the whole impression. It makes you think about modern equivalents. Do we have them? Perhaps a strategically placed piercing, a tiny tattoo, or even the way someone might accentuate a freckle. The desire to add these little points of intrigue, to play with perception using minimal means, seems to be a timeless aspect of human adornment. It's a reminder that beauty isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's the smallest details that make the biggest impact. That tiny black patch or painted red dot could be a whisper, a secret, or a bold declaration, all depending on how and where it was worn. Having considered the subtle art of the artificial beauty mark, let's now broaden our perspective to a more fundamental aspect of beauty ideals, the preferred physique. Across different eras and cultures, including ancient China, the definition of an ideal body shape and its associated features has shifted as dramatically as any fashion in clothing or cosmetics. You're no longer focused on a single detail, but on the entire silhouette, the way a body occupies space, and the attributes that were celebrated or sought after. What was considered the epitome of physical attractiveness in one period might be viewed very differently in another. In ancient China, for example, the ideal female physique underwent several transformations. During the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, a period known for its opulence and relative openness, a more voluptuous and fuller figure was often admired. Paintings and sculptures from this era depict court ladies with rounded faces, ample figures, and a generally robust, healthy appearance. This wasn't about extreme thinness, rather, it was a celebration of a more generous, prosperous form. Think of Yang Guifi, yes, one of the four beauties of ancient China, a favoured consort of Emperor Yuanzong of Tang, who was famously described as having a plump Rubenesque figure. Her beauty was legendary, and her physique set a standard for her time. Contrast this with later periods, such as the Ming, 1368 to 1644, and Qing, 1644 to 1912, dynasties, where a more slender, delicate and willowy physique often became the ideal for women of the elite. This preference for slenderness was sometimes taken to extremes, with an emphasis on an almost fragile, ethereal appearance. This shift coincided with the increasing prevalence and codification of footbinding, which, as we discussed, severely restricted mobility and likely contributed to a perception of women as delicate and ornamental. A woman who could barely walk would naturally appear less robust. Mainstream historical fact: the changing ideals of female body shape in China are well documented in art, literature, and poetry of different periods, reflecting evolving social values, economic conditions, and philosophical influences. This wasn't just about overall body fat percentage. Specific features were also prized. A small, cherry-like mouth, Yingtao Xiaoku, was often considered beautiful. Smooth, jade-like skin was a constant, as we know. The shape of the eyes, the arch of the eyebrows, remember those moth antennae, the delicacy of the hands, all contributed to the overall aesthetic. For men, ideals also varied. During periods of military valour, a strong martial physique might be prized. For scholars and officials, a more refined, even slightly frail appearance could signify a life dedicated to intellectual pursuits rather than physical labour. Globally, the variation is immense. Compare the Tang dynasty preference for plumpness with, say, the ancient Greek ideal of the athletic, proportioned male body, as seen in classical sculpture. Or consider the Venus figurines from prehistoric Europe with their exaggerated breasts, hips and abdomens, thought to symbolise fertility and abundance. A very different kind of ideal from the slender Gibson girl of the late 19th early 20th century West. It makes you realise how culturally constructed our notions of the perfect body truly are. One era's supermodel is another era's, well, just another person. The quirky tidbit here relates to how these ideals were sometimes actively pursued through diet, exercise, or lack thereof, and even restrictive garments. While we don't have ancient Chinese equivalents of an Atkins diet manual, there would certainly have been awareness of how food, intake affected body shape. If plumpness was in vogue, a rich diet would be encouraged for those who could afford it. If slenderness was desired, a more frugal intake might be adopted. In Europe, from the Renaissance onwards, corsetry became a dominant force in shaping the female physique, cinching waists to unnatural smallness, and pushing up bosoms to create the fashionable hourglass or S-bend silhouettes. The pursuit of these idealised shapes often came with significant discomfort and potential health problems, from restricted breathing to organ displacement. It's like footbinding for the torso. Historians still argue whether shifts in ideal body shapes are primarily driven by socio-economic factors, e.g., in times of scarcity, a plump figure might signify wealth and access to food, while in times of abundance, thinness might signify discipline and status. By influential cultural figures, or by deeper psychological archetypes. It's likely a complex interplay. For instance, the shift towards valuing slenderness in women in many Western cultures over the 20th century has been linked to changing roles for women, the rise of consumer culture, and the influence of media. What's clear is that these ideals are rarely static. They are constantly in flux, reflecting the anxieties, aspirations and values of a particular time and place. The ideal body is a cultural artifact, not a biological absolute, and the pressure to conform to these often unattainable ideals can be immense, as it was in ancient China and as it continues to be in many societies today. It makes you think about the current trends, the BBL, Brazilian butt lift phenomenon, the obsession with certain muscle definitions, or the ever-shifting standards for thinness or curvaceousness. Are these any less arbitrary than the Tang dynasty's preference for a fuller figure? Understanding these historical shifts in ideal physiques helps us to see our own contemporary beauty standards with a more critical eye. It reminds us that what we find attractive is often learned, conditioned by the images and messages we absorb from the culture around us. The ancient Chinese woman striving for that perfect Tang dynasty plumpness or Ming dynasty slenderness was responding to her world just as we respond to ours. It's a continuous, evolving human story of shaping and being shaped by our aesthetic desires. As we consider the ever-shifting ideals of the perfect physique, it becomes clear that these various beauty rituals, from the lead-white faces and bound feet of ancient China to the coal-lined eyes of Egypt and the arsenic wafers of Renaissance Europe, were not merely personal whims. They were deeply intertwined with the social fabric, acting as powerful tools for navigating, reinforcing, and sometimes even challenging the social ladder. You're now looking beyond the individual at their dressing table and seeing the broader societal implications of these aesthetic choices. How did these practices shape destinies and define one's place in the world? In rigidly hierarchical societies, which describes most of the ancient world we've explored, beauty practices often served as highly visible markers of class and status. Remember the incredibly long fingernails of Chinese imperial nobles, protected by ornate guards. They were a clear, unambiguous statement: I do not perform manual labour. The same could be said for the ghostly pale complexion achieved with lead powder. A tan signified a life spent toiling in the fields, while a porcelain pallor spoke of leisure, refinement, and indoor existence. These weren't just aesthetic preferences, they were class signifiers, instantly communicating one's position in the social order. Mainstream historical fact: in many ancient societies, including China, Egypt, and Rome, access to certain cosmetics, perfumes, and elaborate adornments was often restricted by cost or even by sumptuary laws, which dictated what different social classes were allowed to wear or use, thereby reinforcing social distinctions. The pursuit of these beauty ideals could quite literally determine a woman's life trajectory, particularly when it came to marriage. In ancient China, for a Han Chinese girl from a family with any social aspirations, having properly bound lotus feet was often a non-negotiable prerequisite for a desirable marriage. A girl with unbound feet, or feet not bound small enough, might be considered unmarriageable, or only eligible for a much lower status match, regardless of her other qualities. The pain and disability were endured because the social rewards, a good marriage, upward mobility for her family, and the perceived status of being beautiful and refined were immense. It's a stark example of how a beauty ritual became a key to social survival and advancement. One's entire future could literally hinge on the size and shape of one's feet. Similarly, in imperial courts across the globe, beauty was a crucial currency. For a concubine in the Forbidden City, her ability to attract and retain the emperor's favour depended heavily on her appearance. This drove the relentless pursuit of those exclusive cosmetic recipes and youth-preserving elixirs we discussed. A blemish, a wrinkle, or a loss of youthful bloom could mean a devastating fall from grace, while exceptional beauty could elevate a woman from obscurity to a position of immense, albeit often precarious, power. Think of Yang Guifei again, whose beauty captivated an emperor and contributed to her family's rise, but also, according to some narratives, played a role in the Anlushan rebellion. Beauty could be both a blessing and a dangerous burden. The quirky tidbit here is how even within a single beauty practice, subtle variations could signify different ranks or stages. Remember the geishas in Japan? A maiko, apprentice geisha, in her first year might only paint her lower lip red, while a senior geisha would paint both lips fully. The style of her hair ornaments, the length of her kimono sleeves, all these visual cues communicated her seniority and experience within the geisha hierarchy. It was a nuanced visual language, understood by those within that world. It's like a secret handshake, but with lipstick and hairpins. The effort and resources invested in these beauty rituals also served to create and maintain social distance. If achieving the ideal look required hours of daily primping, expensive imported ingredients, or specialised attendants like the Roman ornatrix or the Chinese court, hairdressers, then only the wealthy elite could realistically participate. This made beauty itself a form of conspicuous consumption, a way to display one's wealth and leisure. Historians still argue whether these elaborate beauty standards were primarily imposed by men to control women, or if women themselves actively embraced and perpetuated them as a means of competition and self-expression within the constraints of their societies. The reality is likely a complex mix, with women acting as both agents and subjects of these beauty regimes. Moreover, these practices could also reinforce group identity and differentiate one group from another. The Manchu queue hairstyle imposed on Han Chinese men during the Qing dynasty was a deliberate tool to signify Han submission to Manchu rule. Conversely, adherence to traditional Han Chinese dress and grooming, where possible, could be a subtle act of cultural resistance. The ohaguro, blackened teeth in Japan, while practiced by various classes, also helped define a Japanese aesthetic distinct from, say, Chinese or later, Western, dental preferences. The social ladder, then, was often climbed, or at least maintained, on rungs of aesthetic conformity. Deviating from the accepted norms of beauty could lead to ridicule, social ostracism, or missed opportunities. The pressure to conform was immense, especially for women whose social and economic security often depended heavily on their marital prospects. It makes you reflect on the pressures that exist today, albeit perhaps in different forms. The right look for a certain job, the ideal body for a dating app profile. Are these so far removed from the ancient anxieties about achieving the perfect lotus foot, or the most fashionable eyebrow shape? These beauty rituals, therefore, were far more than skin deep. They were deeply embedded in the power structures, social hierarchies, and cultural identities of their time, shaping lives, forging destinies, and leaving an indelible mark on the human story. They were the beautiful, and sometimes brutal, price of belonging. As our long night's journey through the often strange and sometimes perilous world of ancient beauty rituals draws towards a gentle close, it's time to consider how these distant echoes of kohl, ceruse, and bound feet still resonate in our modern lives. You're now drifting back from those ancient boudoirs and imperial courts, carrying with you the scent of sandalwood and the glint of jade. The world around you is familiar again, yet perhaps you see it with slightly different eyes, noticing the subtle ways these age-old human preoccupations with appearance continue to shape our contemporary experience. The tools may have changed, the ingredients are mercifully safer, but the fundamental desires and anxieties often remain strikingly similar. Think about the enduring quest for a flawless complexion, the ancient Chinese desire for lead-white skin, the Renaissance European pursuit of a ghostly pallor, the geisha's opaque oshiroi. They all speak to a yearning for skin that appears perfect, luminous, and free of imperfections. Today, this manifests in our obsession with foundations, concealers, BB creams, Instagram filters, and a multi-billion-dollar skincare industry promising to erase every pore and fine line, mainstream historical fact. The global cosmetics market is valued at hundreds of billions of dollars annually, a testament to our ongoing and highly lucrative fascination with enhancing and altering our appearance. The basic human desire to present an idealized version of ourselves to the world is as strong as ever. The modification of body shape, too, has its ancient parallels. While footbinding stands as an extreme example of reshaping the female form to fit a cultural ideal, consider the modern pressures for thinness, or specific types of curvaceousness, often promoted through media and advertising. The corsets of Renaissance and Victorian Europe, which drastically altered women's silhouettes, find their modern counterparts in shapewear, waist trainers, and even cosmetic surgery procedures aimed at achieving a particular body contour. The Tang dynasty's appreciation for a fuller female figure might seem alien to some current Western ideals, but it reminds us that these standards are fluid and culturally constructed, not absolute truths. Even specific ancient practices have found their modern reincarnations. Remember the ancient Chinese jade rollers. They are now a staple in many a contemporary skincare routine, lauded for their depuffing and circulation-boosting benefits, just as they were centuries ago. The Egyptian kohl eyeliner, the cat eye flick, is a perennial makeup trend, a direct descendant of those ancient Nile beauties. The concept of using natural, sometimes unusual ingredients, while we might shy away from Nightingale droppings, mostly, the modern clean beauty movement, with its emphasis on botanical extracts and naturally derived compounds, echoes the ancient reliance on herbal remedies and nature-based cosmetics. We're still looking to the earth for our beauty solutions, though perhaps with a bit more scientific scrutiny. The quirky tidbit here is the surprising persistence of certain fringe ancient practices in niche modern contexts. We mentioned geisha facials using Nightingale droppings still being offered in some high-end spas. Similarly, treatments involving things like leech therapy, for circulation, though not directly for beauty in the Roman hair dye sense, or bee venom, for its reputed skin-plumping effects, a kind of natural Botox, occasionally pop up, harking back to a time when the line between medicine, magic and cosmetics was much blurrier. It seems our fascination with the exotic and the secret remedy endures. Historians still argue about the degree to which modern beauty standards are truly new versus simply being repackaged versions of age-old aspirations. Is the desire for eternally youthful skin any different in essence from Empress Cixie's quest for longevity through powdered pearls and jade? Is the modern influencer's carefully curated online persona so far removed from the Renaissance lady's strategic placement of mouche to convey a certain image? The technologies and the specific aesthetics may change, but the underlying human motivations, to attract, to belong, to express identity, to feel confident, seem remarkably consistent across the ages. The social implications also persist. Just as beauty rituals in ancient times could signify status and open doors, or close them, our appearance today continues to play a role in social interactions, career prospects, and self-esteem. The pressure to conform to certain beauty norms, often amplified by social media, can be intense, leading to anxieties and insecurities that would likely have been familiar to someone in ancient Rome worrying about their thinning hair, or a Tang Dynasty court lady concerned about her complexion. We may not be using lead powder anymore, thankfully, but the psychological weight of beauty standards can still be heavy. And so, as we reflect on these ancient echoes, we see that our journey has been about more than just peculiar practices. It's been an exploration of human ingenuity, creativity, and our timeless, complex relationship with beauty. The faces and forms we've encountered from ancient China, Egypt, Japan, Rome, and Renaissance Europe are not just historical curiosities. They are mirrors reflecting our own enduring human story. They remind us that the pursuit of beauty is a powerful force, one that has shaped cultures, driven economies, and touched individual lives in profound ways for millennia. The past is not so distant after all. Its desires, its vanities, its strange and wonderful solutions are still whispering to us. Now, the lanterns are dimming, the soft hum of the fan perhaps is lulling you further. The tales of ancient beauty with their curious concoctions and sometimes painful pursuits begin to fade into the quiet of the night. These rituals, born from desires so like our own, to be seen, to be admired, to feel a sense of belonging or distinction, now recede, leaving behind a sense of wonder at the sheer breadth of human expression. The sharp edges of lead powder and the tightness of bindings soften into the mist of time, becoming less about judgment and more about understanding the myriad ways humanity has sought to define and achieve the beautiful. The world of emperors and geishas, of lotus feet and coal-lined eyes grows distant, yet the essence of their quest, the human heart's yearning for an ideal, remains a gentle, familiar pulse. Let these stories settle, not as anxieties, but as a soft acknowledgement of our shared and often peculiar human journey through aesthetics and time. May your own dreams be filled with less hazardous ingredients and far more comfortable shoes.